Hey, what's up boys? This video is for those with parents who don't respect boundaries. You've tried to have honest communication but it never turns out the way you want it to. It ends in silent treatment, you being called ungrateful, and many times it turns into a trauma dumping, volatile, emotional explosion. At the same time, you're very aware of the many sacrifices your parents have made for you. You remember many wonderful moments with your parents. You still respect them as a person. They aren't terrible people, they aren't assholes. They treat people well, they have values that you really respect, and you know that they've done so much for you, but you find yourself not being able to let go of the trauma you've experienced, and you can't help but blame your parents. And you find yourself actively resisting this hatred you have for your family because you know it would reflect your own ungratefulness and your own naivety, that you don't understand how many sacrifices your parents have made. You have plenty of reason to love your parents, but also plenty of reason to hate them. Empirically, it's largely observed that our strong negative emotions and unhealthy tendencies are commonly attributed to our parents. This idea was pioneered by Sigmund Freud, a very popular neurologist from the past, and he believed that personality develops during early childhood. Sigmund Freud also founded psychoanalysis, which is a type of treatment that's based on the theory that our present is shaped by our past, the assumption of cause and effect. He believed that people could be cured by making their unconscious thoughts a conscious one, and by gaining that insight, heal from the unconscious motivations of negative emotion and things like that. We see this idea of healing from our past traumas all over social media, how our parents caused different attachment styles, how our parents gave us different negative emotion tendencies, and how we were raised strongly affected how we make relationships. And this understanding is something that has helped me quite a bit with my mental health. However, I do want to bring up the idea that it is not uncommon that we could just be fishing out any excuse we can find to stick to inaction. Maybe in order to refute responsibility and to save our own self-perception, we could be just taking every problem we have and throwing it onto our parents. When I adopted the idea that I could be using psychoanalysis as an excuse, I realized that I was immediately attributing many of my mistakes and immaturity and lapse of judgment immediately to my parents. And I would do this with the guise that I was knowledgeable on psychoanalysis. If my parents asked me anything along the lines of why did you react like that, why are you so defensive, why are you so anxious, I'd immediately defend myself with, oh, because you did this when I was younger and that's why I'm like that. And then I would snobbishly look away and frown like an absolute autist. While I could be right from a psychoanalysis standpoint, thoughtlessly pushing the blame like this is so immature. Right? And if I'm just dismissing responsibility for the flaws that I have, then who does that even help? It doesn't change anything. If anything, it lets me ruminate and hold on to my issues and use it as an apparent excuse that hurts both me and my parents. Alfred Adler suggests a different perspective to Sigmund Freud. He suggests that we behave based on our goals at the current moment. He coins this term teleology. For example, when we attribute our faults to our parents in that current moment, our goal could be avoiding responsibility. Taking in the problem as our own fault could be frustrating, difficult, and painful. And that's why in that moment, in order to make it easier for ourselves, we just immediately dismiss it to somebody else's responsibility. And we can do that because of verified studies of psychoanalysis and how childhood trauma reflects in an adult's life. We have apparent scientific evidence that we can blame our parents for our faults, and that makes it the most powerful dependency because it's true. We can argue that there's plenty of truth in cause and effect, but for our own sakes, it could be quite helpful to see our actions as what we want in the current moment so that we can take full responsibility of it. With this perspective, instead of dismissing a fault that we may have, we can take it in, take note of it, and put in realistic effort, deliberate work in order to fix that problem. This is what I did that I observed actually improved my relationship with my parents. But take it with a huge pinch of salt because I'm 21 this year and I know nothing. I found myself actively resisting my hatred for my parents, so I knew that I had to choose. Either I find a way to detach from them or I lean into love for them and work around that. I wanted to start to take responsibility for the relationship I had with my family, so what I did was I wrote them all a letter. I wrote a letter for my dad and I read it to him in person, in the car on the way to tuition. It's awkward as fuck, but I had to do it. And I think it was a pretty good choice because soon after, when I was in military training, there was a period of time where I had to go out stay a few days. And he wrote me a letter back, which was the most wonderful letter I've ever read in my life. I almost died crying. Everybody left and I was still sitting in that same spot crying. And my dad is unaffectionate as fuck. So that letter to me was just ridiculous. It was extraordinary. That's probably one of the hardest I've ever cried. I deliberately started to express love even when it's awkward. Like I tried to make a joke out of it so that I could do it more. I'll say I love you in the most retarded times, and saying that to your father, feels kind of homosexual, But I just kept doing it until it felt okay. Shit is so cute, I swear. I also tried to increase my resilience by deliberately challenging them and saying things that they could disagree with. I heard somebody say that your parents will never respect you if you never disagree with them. I'm not saying you must constantly argue and challenge them like an ungrateful, egocentric asshole, but I think it might be beneficial if we speak on things we believe in, even if it means our parents will have a volatile emotional outbreak. Of course, things are very situational and contextual, and you never want to follow any absolutes of anyone when they tell you how to live your life, right? Communication is remarkably important. You don't want to store hatred and resentment over time and eventually outbreak and do something absolutely stupid. And let's take the concept of antifragility. We need these small conflicts in order to make sure something is robust. If we don't have a little bit of disorder to our relationships, they would just be very fragile and they wouldn't mean anything, really. I'm very lucky that the actions that I deliberately took actually led to some visible results. For many people, it could be remarkably difficult. And no matter how much they try to communicate, their parents won't listen. The parents will restrict them more and more to punish them for even speaking their own ideas. Their emotional outbreaks could get worse and worse. They might start ignoring you for whole weeks on end. And if we look at the Stoicism's perspective, it's how they react is their choice, right? That's their task, and you should just focus on your own tasks and the person you want to be. But it's really not that simple all the time. And especially when you're young, you hold no leverage or any power or any respect. But if we're going to choose love and we're not going to give in to just hating our parents and distancing from them, then what we have to do is tolerate and endure and keep looking for what we can do next and make sure we don't make any excuses. We just have to try really hard to hold on to that conscientiousness, the hope that things can get better. Over time, I also spent more time with my grandparents, and I learned more about my parents through my grandparents, and they just appear more and more human. And surprisingly, that let me respect them more because I learned about their hardships and their story, and the level of respect I have for them becomes more deep than simply the label of them being my parents, so they are automatically respected. Parents will interfere with our tasks and responsibilities. They care too much to just sit there while you make decisions that they perceive to be wrong. It's a different kind of relationship. They aren't our friends, and it can be pretty exhausting that somebody keeps injecting themselves into our lives, into our tasks. Let me have my responsibilities while you're trying to take my responsibilities away from me and then make mistakes that I have to deal with later and cause me more problems. It can be insanely suffocating and frustrating and confusing, and you just feel like it's adding extra problems to your life that you just don't need. I remember I write hate paragraphs about my father on my iPhone notes app. Let me see if I can find them. Like, look at this shit, eh? That's pretty badass. What am I even writing? I remember I closed the door of my room and start making loud noises. I'll punch the wall, I'll bang my head against the wall, I'll make like weird grunting noises that are half muffled so my mom would kind of hear it. So there's a chance that she would hear me express my pain and realize that and then stop disturbing me. And I do all these things to express my pain because having an honest conversation is too difficult and scary. And it just led to me doing more and more stupid things. Sometimes I like to remind myself to try to look at it this way. It's our parents' first time living too. And as we were growing up, there were countless events that we don't remember of them smiling and playing with us, them getting excited while teaching us how to walk, them thinking of ideas of what they should name us before we were born, holding our hand, showing us off to relatives, teaching us how to do things for the first time with an excited expression. Those are all events that exist, but we don't remember. For us privileged ones, since we know we'll eventually lean into love, we gotta hold on to the strength to endure the difficulty, because what else is more important than our relationships? And a good relationship doesn't necessarily mean one that is the smoothest, least problem, zero argument experience, right? People are vastly different, and when trying to connect with another person, there are always going to be a shit ton of complications. And the stronger a bond is, it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be less conflict. And being willing to have that conflict in the first place could very much mean we care about the other person and the direction of the relationship. Unfortunately, we are going to choose to fight anyway because that's just who we are, that's our nature. That's oddly how we were raised. We gotta take responsibility and do our earnest best at working towards better relationships with our parents, improving ourselves, and hopefully in turn improve our circumstances. Many times we look at the sources of problems for our relationship with our parents and we find that it's because of scarcity, lack of financial success, lack of academic success. And let's say even if you did achieve those successes, if you were remarkably rich, if you did super well for your exams, that wouldn't improve your relationship with your parents. They'll just keep quiet and show more love. But you know that that's a facade, and that love is dependent on your successes. And because of that, you can never properly connect with your parents because you could just be thinking, oh, without these successes, I wouldn't be bonding with them in the first place. The successes you lack are not what stands between you and your parents' relationship. But that is just one perspective of things, that is just one consideration. There are unlimited circumstances out there. There are too many things to consider in terms of what you do next, in terms of the solution you find. I just want to give some perspective, and maybe that perspective could expand your viewpoint in a way where you notice something that clicks and works in your situation and you try it and it actually does. Then I can't help but be so happy for you. This shit really not easy at all. I love you. I wish you genuine good luck, alright? Maybe something will change. Just keep trying. Let's see what we can do. I love you. You got this. Don't give up on relationships. To better world.